Hey, are you okay? I called out to the blonde woman on a mountain trail, about a 20-minute hike from the parking lot halfway up the mountain. When she turned around, I noticed her features were distinctly different from those of an American, so I assumed she was an Asian. Hi. Actually, I've hurt my foot. She explained to me that while climbing the trail, she had twisted her ankle after trampling on a rock. Her destination was the same temple I was heading to, but it would be tough for her to walk with her current condition. When I offered her advice in the Japanese I had learned long ago, she explained why she was so determined to reach the temple. I understand. If that's the case, I'll help you. I extended my hand, and she smiled and thanked me. At that moment, I hadn't realized. I had no clue just how significant her influence on my life would be. My name is John. They say life has several turning points, and for me, it was when my mother passed away 3 years ago. My mother had always been adventurous and wouldn't be satisfied until she experienced things for herself. Before she died of a kidney disease, she said to me with a lonely look on her face, "Oh, I wish I could have visited Antarctica at least once." John, if there's something you want to do, make sure you do it while you're still healthy. Up until then, I had been a person who prioritized stability, avoiding failure and uncertainty. After graduating from college, I chose a government job not out of a noble desire to improve people's lives, but simply because I wanted a stable income. However, my mother's words lingered in my mind, leading me to make a significant decision. I decided to quit my government job and dive into the world of subculture, which I had always loved, including manga, anime, and games. For someone like me who valued stability, entering an industry known for its rapid changes seemed unthinkable. But spurred on by my mother's words, I chose to pursue a path that could inspire many people in the subculture world I had been immersed in since childhood. At the age of 29, I resigned from my government job and joined Autumn Rain Publishing, a mid-sized publishing company. Autumn Rain Publishing publishes a wide range of books, including novels, nonfiction, and academic books, and recently, they've been publishing many manga that serve as the basis for anime. By emphasizing my practical experience as a civil servant and my lifelong passion for the subculture, I managed to join the event planning department at Autumn Rain Publishing. The main tasks of the event planning department include organizing events to promote our company's content and preparing for participation in various events. Naturally, given my geek background, my job was to promote Autumn Rain Publishing's manga at events. After reviewing the data from previous events our company had participated in, I suggested to my boss, Michael, we should participate in this year's Autumn Come Fest. Autumn Come Fest is a large-scale self-published manga convention held every fall. While self-published manga conventions are typically seen as amateur-only events, in recent years, many have included corporate booths, with other publishers, anime studios, and game companies participating in past Autumn Come Fests. Seeing that our company had no record of participating in such conventions, I made a strong recommendation. You're right, gaining experience at such events could be valuable for our future initiatives. Alright, John, put together a proposal. With Michael's approval, I used my experience as a participant to prepare for our booth at Autumn Come Fest. 6 months after the proposal, I found myself at the event venue as an exhibitor. This year's Autumn Come Fest was held in a neighboring state, more than a 5-hour drive from where I lived. Due to the possibility of bad weather on the day of the event, the staff from Autumn Rain Publishing decided to head to the venue the day before to complete the necessary preparations. Since the preparations were finished by the morning, I decided to drive to a place I had wanted to visit for a long time. It's on foot from here. Wow, it's exactly like the anime. Getting out of the car, I was moved by the landscape, identical to the one from an anime I had watched countless times as a child. The parking lot was halfway up the mountain, and an unpaved trail quietly led to the summit. I was visiting the location said to be the model for the anime I was obsessed with as a child, Whirlwind Girl. Whirlwind Girl is a story about a boy who meets a girl from another world on his way to a temple where he always spent time alone, and grows as he protects her from an organization from her world. The scene where the protagonist, a lonely boy named Jake, climbs this mountain trail and meets the girl escaping from another world is etched vividly in my mind. Knowing that the temple was within driving distance from the Autumn Come Fest venue, I decided to take this pilgrimage to the Whirlwind Girl location. By the way, a pilgrimage involves visiting the actual locations that inspired a work. So, this is where Jake. Entering the trail, I slowly walked, reminiscing about the anime scenes. For popular anime, the model locations often gain fame and attract many fans. However, Whirlwind Girl was created before I was born and wasn't widely known. So the trail and the temple ahead were not famous as anime pilgrimage sites. Because of this, I could take my time exploring without worrying about anyone watching me. As I walked along the mountain path for about 20 minutes, I spotted a blonde woman sitting against a tree. If her condition had worsened, maybe I should call an ambulance. I'm worried about her, so I asked, "Are you okay?" And she looked at me with anxious eyes. Judging by her complexion and distinct features different from an American, she seemed to be a tourist from abroad. She had colored contacts, with her right eye a deep green and the other orange. I had a feeling I had seen her somewhere before recently. Suddenly, a realization struck me as I looked at this strikingly beautiful Asian woman in front of me. "You're Nanae, the cosplayer, aren't you?" I used my Japanese skills acquired from a long time ago to speak to her. Having lived in Japan until I was in the 6th grade and having used Japanese to deal with Japanese visitors during my time as a civil servant, I prided myself on my near-native pronunciation. Her eyes widened as she replied in halting English, "Yes, I am Nanae." Nani is a cosplayer living in Japan who has been active on social media for several years. According to the event's official website, she was scheduled to participate in a photoshoot at this year's Autumn Komi Fest, dressed as an anime character. Relieved that we could communicate, Nanae said in her hesitant English, "You can speak Japanese." "Good. Can you understand my English?" I crouched to meet her eye level and said, "I understand. But since this seems like an emergency, shall we continue in Japanese? Are you feeling unwell?" Nanae explained that she had twisted her right ankle on a rock while heading to the temple further up the trail. Following her gaze, I saw her swollen ankle. "Walking is going to be tough. Let me lend you my shoulder, and let's go back to the parking lot together. We can head to a hospital from there." Thinking it was best to prioritize treatment, I suggested that she turn back. However, she shook her head and said, "I must go to the temple ahead. Visiting the site from Whirlwind Girl is one of my reasons for coming to the US. The Autumn Coma Fest is tomorrow, and I will leave the US the day after. So, I only have today." Most people would probably tell her there was no need to push herself to visit while injured. But when Nani mentioned Whirlwind Girl, I felt a strong desire for her to see the site. I love that series too. I never expected to meet a fellow fan here. I said this excitedly and then turned my back to her. "But I can't let you walk in that condition. However, as a fellow fan of the anime, I want to help you visit the site. So, would you let me carry you?" It was probably an unexpected suggestion for her. Nanae hesitated with a frown but then gave a small nod and a cute smile, saying in English, "Please, I'd appreciate it. I wish I'd gone on a diet." She then leaned her weight onto my back. Though it normally takes about 10 minutes to walk from where Nanae was sitting to the temple, carrying someone slowed me down significantly. With breaks along the way, it took me about 30 minutes to finally reach Ryushin Temple, the temple from Whirlwind Girl. Wow! This is where Jake and Fina fought the organization's monsters, right? Nanae exclaimed with joy from my back as we arrived at Ryushin Temple. During the walk, we had talked extensively about Whirlwind Girl, knowing we were both fans of the anime. "That's right. Look over there. Those are the steps where they ate rice balls in the second episode. Shall we go check it out?" Nanae responded enthusiastically, "Yes, please. Oh, this is what a pilgrimage is like. I can't wait to take pictures," looking around eagerly. In the anime, Ryushin Temple served as a secret base for Jake and the girl from another world, Fina. It was the setting for many of their daily scenes, filled with so many topics to talk about for anime fans. Though I should have been exhausted from the trail, the joy of visiting a favorite anime's pilgrimage site with Nanae on my back made me forget my fatigue. Before I knew it, we had been exploring the temple grounds for over an hour. "I'm so sorry. You've been carrying me for so long. Am I not heavy?" After finishing our exploration, we decided to take a break on a bench near the temple office. Nanae, who had settled down, expressed her concern for me, making me feel a bit embarrassed. You were not heavy at all. Compared to carrying heavy equipment for Autumn Komi Fest, it was nothing. But how is your ankle? As I said this, I looked at her ankle. While touring the temple, we asked the temple office for something to cool her sprained ankle, and they kindly provided an ice pack. Her ankle was now wrapped with a towel holding the ice pack in place. It feels much better. You know, there's a scene like this in Whirlwind Girl too. Jake carried Fina when she was injured. Her smile, as she spoke about the anime, was as charming as a flower, and I couldn't help but be captivated by it. Though her age wasn't public, she seemed to be around my age or maybe a bit younger. As I was about to be entranced by the charm of such a famous cosplayer, who was invited to events all over Japan, a cold drop hit my cheek. The forecast said the weather would worsen tomorrow morning, but it looks like the rain is coming now. As I muttered this, raindrops started to fall from the cloudy sky. Since we would get drenched sitting on the bench, I carried her again and headed towards the eaves of the main hall for shelter. I thought the rain would stop soon if it was just a passing shower, but I was completely wrong. Within less than 20 minutes, the wind picked up, and the heavy raindrops pounded the ground with a deafening noise. As Nanae and I exchanged worried glances, one of the monks from the temple office approached us with an umbrella. When we thanked him again for lending us the ice pack, he shook his head, saying it was nothing, and told us something shocking. That strong wind earlier caused a tree to fall on the path leading up to the parking lot. I checked with a friend who's a contractor, and they said it's too dangerous to work in this weather, so the road won't be cleared until at least tomorrow morning. When I translated the monk's explanation for Nanae, she covered her mouth and widened her eyes in surprise. The monk, seeing her distressed look, kindly suggested, "We have a guest house here. You can stay overnight free of charge since it's an emergency. And as there are no other guests, we can offer you a private room." Considering the weather and the steepness of the path we had climbed, staying at the temple seemed like the best option. Nanae and I thanked the monk gratefully and followed him to the guest house. The first thing we did upon arriving at the guest house was to inform the necessary parties. We notified the hotel we were supposed to stay at and Michael, who was participating in the Autumn Komi Fest as a staff member. According to the weather forecast, the storm was expected to subside by midnight. The monk's friend, a contractor, promised to remove the fallen tree first thing in the morning. So we should be able to reach the Autumn Komi Fest venue by noon at the latest. When I explained this over the phone, Michael said calmly, "I understand. Let me know your exact arrival time once you have it. You've prepared well today, so don't worry if you're a bit late tomorrow. Everything will be fine." Nanae also struggled to inform her contacts about the possibility of being late for the Autumn Komi Fest tomorrow. For those she absolutely had to call, I helped by translating, and we managed to relay the necessary information. "You've been a great help. I thought I had studied enough English, but it's still tough to communicate about complex issues," she said. Bowing apologetically, I shook my head and replied, "It's no problem. We help each other in times of need. Besides, think of this as a rare experience. It's not every day you get to stay at a temple guest house." When I explained what a guest house was, she seemed intrigued and said, "So monks train here, we are lucky that we get to stay at such a place." Smiling cheerfully. However, the guest house only had minimal lighting, and being in the mountains during a stormy night felt quite unsettling. After finishing our meal of temple cuisine, Nanae and I volunteered to help with the dishes and then took a break in the guest house's entrance hall. "By the way, John, why is your Japanese so good?" As a Japanese, I was surprised at how easy it is to understand you, she asked. Realizing that we had only talked about Whirlwind Girl since meeting, I noticed we hadn't shared much about ourselves. I told her about spending my childhood in Japan until I moved back to America at age 12. When I was little, I only spoke English at home and lessons in school, so Japanese used to be my stronger language. My interest in America actually started with Whirlwind Girl, I explained. Nanae blinked her different colored eyes a few times and whispered, "No way." When I asked what was wrong, she shook her head and said, "It's nothing." Her face turned as red as an apple. I asked as I was getting worried, "Are you feeling unwell?" The monk mentioned they have some over-the-counter medicine. "Should I get some for you?" But she shook her head repeatedly and said, "I'm fine." I just have some things to think about. I'll go rest now. She then went to her room. Feeling a bit puzzled by her behavior but having nothing else to do, I returned to my room and fell asleep to the sound of the storm pounding the guest house. The next day, the storm stopped by midnight as predicted, and the contractor began clearing the fallen tree early in the morning. Fortunately, Nanae and I should be able to reach the Autumn Komi Fest venue, albeit a bit later than planned. Her ankle was almost completely healed, and she could walk on her own. Since Nanae had taken a taxi to the parking lot, I offered, "We're heading to the same place. Would you like to ride with me?" Though I had been worried about her after last night's incident, Nanae's eyes lit up, and she said, "Thank you. I'm sorry about yesterday. I'm fine now," bowing repeatedly to emphasize that I shouldn't worry about it. I was relieved to see her in good spirits and said, "All right then, let's get going," encouraging her to get into the car. Participating in the Autumn Komi Fest as an exhibitor for the first time felt like a department store closing sale with the crowd. The products prepared by Autumn Rain Publishing were character goods from our manga series. Since these were newly created specifically for Autumn Komi Fest, even our backup stock was selling out rapidly. Seeing the unexpected sales, Michael patted my shoulder and said, "We'll need to stock more next year," clearly delighted. During breaks, I visited the photo shoot area where Nanae was participating. Under the gaze of many photographers, she struck poses perfectly embodying an anime character. Responding to pose requests in English, she truly exemplified a professional cosplayer, and I felt a deep sense of respect for her. During a break from the photo shoot, she waved at me from afar. I wanted to talk to her, but knowing she was working, I decided not to interrupt and returned to the booth to continue the hectic sales. To my surprise, Nanae, still in her anime character cosplay, visited our booth. I have a lot of Autumn Rain Publishing's manga. It's great that they're also available in Japanese, so I can recommend them to my friends in Japan. My colleagues were wide-eyed at the sudden appearance of the beautiful Asian woman. Nanae bought a few items from our booth, and as she prepared to leave for her next venue, she expressed her regret at parting. As she was leaving, she gently squeezed my hand and said, "Thank you so much for yesterday. I'll see you later," before departing from the Autumn Rain Publishing booth. Wondering what she meant by "see you later," I noticed a small note she had slipped into my hand. Discreetly checking its contents, I read, "Could you meet me at the station square at 7 p.m? There is something I want to talk to you about." Feeling that it would be a shame to part ways with her like this, I spent the remaining time at Autumn Komi Fest in a state of restless anticipation. After successfully wrapping up the cleanup, I arrived at the designated station square precisely at the appointed time. She's not here yet. Looking around, I couldn't spot Nanae's trademark blonde hair. Just as I felt relieved and took a deep breath, someone tapped me on the shoulder from behind. I turned around to see an Asian woman with short black hair and hazel eyes standing there. Startled by the unexpected person, I gaped as she said, "Sorry I'm late." "It's me, Nanae. You didn't recognize me in this look, did you?" She stuck her tongue out playfully. "Nanae?" "But," I stammered. She explained that when she was cosplaying as Nanae, she always wore a blonde wig and colored contacts to make her appearance more distinctive. She had even kept the wig and contacts on until just before bed at the guest house. But more importantly, a face from deep in my memory resurfaced and dominated my thoughts. Could it be Irina? When I mentioned the name of the friend I remembered most from my childhood in Japan, Irina gave me the biggest smile yet. "You remembered. It's been 18 years. Let's go somewhere we can talk," she said. My loud exclamation had drawn the attention of those around us. "Yeah. How about that bar over there?" Still shocked by the unexpected reunion, I walked with Irina to a nearby bar. After we each finished our first beer, we started talking non-stop. Her real name was Irina. The name Nanae was a stage name she adopted from her beloved grandmother. She had started cosplaying because of something her grandmother said just before she passed away 2 years ago. "Listen, Irina. You only live once, and there are limited things you can do while you're young, so give challenges while you can." After graduating from college and working for a trading company, Irina had felt that her life was somewhat dull. So, I ventured into the world of cosplay and subculture. You know how much I loved cosplay. As a child, she would modify her clothes to mimic anime characters and often got scolded by her parents. I see. Actually, Hearing about her past, I shared my story about how my late mother had also taught me the importance of giving challenges. After expressing her condolences for my mother, Irina said with teary eyes, "I feel like it's fate. After all, it was Whirlwind Girl that brought us together as friends and allowed us to meet again yesterday. We had become friends as children because I got hooked on Whirlwind Girl, a series Irina had recommended. I'm really grateful to you, Irina. Before that, I never really felt like I belonged in America. But when you said you were envious of me being born in the country that made such cool anime and recommended Whirlwind Girl, I started to see America as my roots. From what I learned yesterday, Irina was leaving for Japan tomorrow. Not wanting our fateful reunion to end here, I decided to share a long-held feeling with her. When we were kids, talking about anime with you made me happier than anything. Whirlwind Girl is undoubtedly a great series. But I kept rewatching it because I wanted a reason to be closer to you. Holding her hand, I looked at her earnestly and confessed my feelings. I want to be close to you again, like we used to be. Even after you return to Japan, I want to stay friends, or ideally, something more. Hearing my confession, Irina swallowed hard and tears welled up in her eyes. I've always liked you since we were kids. I was too embarrassed to say it back then. Shortly after I returned to America, Irina's family moved to another prefecture. Amidst the chaos, she lost my contact information, and that's how we ended up losing touch with each other. I always hoped to see you again, so I kept studying English. I want to be more than friends, like Jake and Fina. The last scene in Whirlwind Girl shows the grown-up protagonist and heroine surrounded by their family, seemingly their children, leading a happy life. Knowing her true feelings made my eyes well up with tears, and I said, "Thank you. I'm looking forward to the future with you, Irina." Afterward, I became much more dedicated to my work than I had ever been as a civil servant. Having Irina as my girlfriend supporting me from afar was the biggest reason. Irina also continued to grow, gaining attention as a cosplayer both domestically and internationally. A year after we started dating, Irina appeared as a guest at an event I hosted for Autumn Rain Publishing. I truly love America. I owe who I am today to American anime. Seeing Irina greet the fans at the event in fluent English, thanks to our many conversations, made my heart swell with pride. However, a year after that event, Irina suddenly announced her retirement from cosplay. The reason was that she had accepted my marriage proposal. Fina from Whirlwind Girl also devoted herself to her family after getting married, right? So I want to dedicate myself entirely to you after our marriage. One day during a holiday, Irina explained the reason for her retirement from cosplay while snuggling up to me in the living room. I embraced my beloved wife and said, "I will work hard for our family, just like Jake." We pledged to build a happy home. Just like the anime that brought us together. You're embarrassing to be around. Get out, you loser. Olivia had always been harsh since we got married, but this time she went too far. I clenched my fists in frustration. You can't say things like that. I'm not a loser. Then my son, David, spoke with a look of disdain. I've never acknowledged you as my dad. You're a disgrace to this family. It was a shocking statement. I packed my things into a small suitcase and prepared to leave the house. Just then, my daughter, Emily, rushed out from the hallway. "Dad, I'm coming with you." I don't like Mom at all. A warm feeling welled up inside me, and I took Emily's hand. Mom called me a loser, but actually, I make $30 million a year. Emily seemed to think it was a joke and laughed brightly. So, Emily and I took a train and arrived at a luxury residential area. As Emily looked around in confusion, we stopped in front of an especially large mansion. My name is Benjamin. I'm a 52-year-old caregiver. I've been working in this job for almost 10 years now. Being a caregiver is tough, but it's a rewarding job. I truly believe that switching to this career was the right decision. I used to work as an accountant at a small firm. The company was a real grind, and I was working late at night every day. Just as I started questioning if this was the life I wanted, my mother, who lived alone in the countryside, fell ill. She needed a wheelchair and required constant care. Having lost my father when I was young, my mother was my only family. I left my own family behind and moved back to my hometown to care for her. I've never regretted quitting my job. I had heard that finding a new job would be tough after leaving the workforce for caregiving. But I was determined to cherish my last days with my mother. The reality of caregiving is far from easy. Helping with the bathroom and baths, cooking soft meals, assisting with eating, each day was consumed by these tasks. She wouldn't sleep well at night, leaving me sleep deprived. Watching my mother regress to a childlike state was heartbreaking. If this were child rearing, the child would grow and become more capable. But with elderly care, no matter how much care you provide, their abilities diminish, and the hardship increases. Had I tried to handle it all alone, I might have despaired at life. What saved me was a nearby care facility. I used every service they offered, like day service, short stays, and home visits. The caregivers treated my mother so well, and I can't express how much they saved us. After my mother passed away, I was hit with a devastating sense of emptiness. Seeing my state, Emma, my mother's care manager, made a suggestion. "Benjamin, why don't you consider working in caregiving? People like you are needed in this field." Could I really help? I know caregiving needs more hands. If I can help other families like mine, I'd love to do it. So, I returned home from the countryside and started working as a caregiver. The only ones who never understood caregiving were my family. I married Olivia 10 years ago. At that time, I was still an office worker, making good money with all the overtime. We met at a matchmaking party for people in their 40s. Olivia had been married before, and her son, David, was 10 at the time. I had always been single and had a strong desire for a family. Olivia often tearfully recounted how she had struggled as a single mother since David was born. Unable to secure a permanent position at work, she bounced from one temporary job to another, struggling to make ends meet. She was a bit chubby, but that added to her charm. She had a warm smile that seemed to embrace everything. "Benjamin, you always wear such worn-out clothes. Why don't we go shopping together sometime? I'll help you pick out some outfits." That sounds great. I don't often buy new clothes because I feel like I can still wear the ones I have. At the time, I thought Olivia was just making an excuse for us to go on a date. We met at the station and went around various clothing stores, buying clothes and accessories. I looked pretty stylish by the end of it, but I also ended up spending a lot. She even took me to a fancy hair salon where I had my hair cut, permed and dyed. When they said, "all done," my hair in the mirror showed no noticeable changes, making me wonder what, if anything, had been effective. I later found out that the salon owner was a friend of Olivia's. She took me there to help support the business. Looking back, I might have been a bit desperate. As things with Olivia got better, I thought this might be my only chance in life. They say love makes you less rational, and that's exactly what happened. Olivia seemed more beautiful than ever. David was a cheeky kid even back then, but I saw it as youthful energy. However, he never showed me any respect. Still, I thought things would change once we became a family, so I proposed to Olivia, and we got married. My mother, who was healthy at the time, was overjoyed that I finally got married. But Olivia, who had always liked flashy things, started spending money recklessly and eventually quit her job without consulting me. "I'm quitting my job because I'm only getting temp positions and it doesn't pay well. I want to be a full-time housewife and focus on raising our child." Our daughter was born shortly after we got married, and we named her Emily. I finally felt like we had become a real family. Emily was a sweet child and very attached to me. I worked harder than ever, to the point where it affected my health. I felt numbness all over my body and had bouts of dizziness. I managed to get by each day, pushing through the discomfort. Then my mother's caregiving began, and I returned to my hometown alone. To my surprise, the numbness and dizziness disappeared completely when I was away from my family. After caring for my mother until she passed away, I returned home to find David in college and Emily in 5th grade. While Olivia and David had been living lavishly, spending my savings. When I got home, Emily came running to me. "Dad, welcome back. You must be tired." "Thanks, Emily. Where are your mom and David?" "They went out for drinks. They knew you were coming home today." Emily was the only one who welcomed me back. Olivia and David didn't appreciate my 5 years of caregiving at all. After my mother's caregiving, I became more frugal. Even if people mocked my shabby clothes, I didn't care. Olivia and her son cost a lot, and my caregiver's salary wasn't as high as before. So, I had to be frugal to manage. I also wanted to save for the future. Everyone will need care someday. When that time comes, money is what matters most, as I've learned from experience. My mother managed to be cared for at home, but there are limits to family caregiving. If one needs to enter a nursing facility, it costs a lot. It's best if the person can cover it with their pension, but we don't live in an era with ample pension funds. In that case, you'll need to dip into your savings to ensure you get the care you need until the end. This way, you won't burden your family, which I believe is the best option. That's why I work at the care facility every day. The facility I work at mainly offers day service and short stays. Day service involves spending time with the users from morning until evening, engaging in recreational activities. During this time, their families are relieved from caregiving duties and can enjoy a moment of peace. Short stays allow users to stay at the facility for a few days. Like day service, this provides caregivers with some free time to refresh both body and mind. Every morning, I ride my bike to the nursing facility, change into my uniform, and start my work. There, I formed a special bond with Sophia, who uses the day service 3 times a week. I call Sophia Mom. On the other hand, Sophia calls me Benjamin. Sophia is a very intelligent elderly woman, but she has poor legs and uses a wheelchair. I dedicate the feelings of unfinished business from my own mother's care to Sophia. Sophia lives in a mansion and recently made the whole house barrier-free. Seeing wealthy seniors like her reinforces the importance of money in the end. Sophia completely trusts me and often tells others, "My son takes good care of me." "Benjamin, I'd like to get some fresh air. Could you push my wheelchair?" "Of course, Mom. The weather is nice, let's go out to the garden." Our natural interaction brings smiles from my colleagues. One day, I discovered my checking account, used for living expenses, was empty when I updated my passbook. It was the middle of the month, with a long way to go until my next paycheck. I immediately took out the savings passbook and confronted Olivia. "What is this? Why is the account empty?" "It's only the middle of the month." When I glared at her, expecting an excuse, Olivia brazenly responded. "You say it's for living expenses, but it's never enough. There are other savings, but this is the only account I can access." "Of course. It's empty. I've put in enough for the 3 of us to live on." "You're spending too much. You expect me to wear ragged clothes like you? Besides, being with you is embarrassing. Get out, you loser." Olivia had always had a sharp tongue since we got married, but calling the only breadwinner a loser was too much. This time, she had gone too far. I clenched my fists in frustration and managed to speak. "You can't talk like that. I'm not a loser. I'm working hard as a husband and father." Then David spoke with a look of disdain. "I've never acknowledged you as my dad. You're a disgrace to this family." It was a shocking statement. From there, it turned into an endless dispute. We unleashed all our pent-up frustrations and started arguing. "Do you think we can live without my income? It's heartbreaking that my hard work only earns these words. You earning money is a given. I've been taking care of the house and the kids. But do you know how humiliating it was to walk beside you? Just like David said, you were an embarrassment." I was momentarily speechless. I never imagined she felt that way about being with me. "Fine. I'll leave. But don't regret it later. Even if we divorce, I'm keeping this house. It's compensation for 10 years of living in poverty." Though I said I would leave, I hadn't mentioned divorce, but Olivia brought up compensation. She must have been thinking about divorce for a while. "With things like this, we can't continue living together. We've been married for 10 years, but for 5 of those years, I was away caring for my mother. Back then, our household was divided, and I sent extra living expenses, thinking it would help. Maybe that was a mistake." The account Olivia managed was always empty by the end of the month, but I assumed it was because David and Emily's education costs were high. But to David, I was just an embarrassing father. So there's no point in staying together. If I leave, divorce will naturally follow. What was our marriage for? If I hadn't married Olivia, would I have married someone else? Maybe that woman would have cared for my mother with me. But it's all my responsibility. I chose Olivia and decided on this life. I silently stood up and packed my things into a small suitcase in the bedroom. There was a knock, and Emily peeked in. "Dad, what are you going to do now?" "Mom and David don't want me here, so I'm leaving." "But this is your home, isn't it?" Hearing Emily's voice nearly brought me to tears. I patted her on the head and said, "Take care," before heading down the stairs. I walked out the front door, intending to head to the main street. Just then, Emily, with her school bag on, came running after me. "Dad, I'm coming with you." "I don't like Mom." A warm feeling surged in my chest, and I took Emily's hand. I wasn't alone. The warmth from Emily's hand melted my troubled heart. We walked side by side towards the nearest station. Emily seemed a bit nervous. Maybe she was worried about our future. To reassure her, I revealed the truth I had been keeping. Mom called me a loser, but actually, I make $30 million a year. "No way, Dad. You're just an ordinary person. And I know caregivers don't make that much." Emily seemed to think I was joking. Without saying more, we got on the train and arrived at a luxury residential area. Emily was bewildered as we stopped in front of an especially large mansion. I rang the doorbell and gave my name, and Sophia's voice responded. "You have the spare key, don't you? Come on in." While Emily looked puzzled, I took out the key from my pocket and opened the door. Sophia greeted us, wheeling herself in her wheelchair. "I'm sorry for the sudden visit. It seems my wife and I are getting a divorce." "I see. But now we can move forward with the adoption plans." I quickly introduced Emily to Sophia. Sophia smiled warmly and greeted her. "Nice to meet you, Emily." Emily still looked confused, but we went into the spacious living room since it wasn't a conversation for the entrance. Emily was astonished by the luxurious furnishings and the room size. "Are we going to live here?" "Why?" "I'm going to be adopted by Sophia. For that, I needed your mom's consent." "If I became Sophia's son while still married, your mom would have likely spent Sophia's assets. So that's why you couldn't be adopted until now." I quietly said, "Exactly." "Emily, is it okay if you have to change schools to commute from here?" Sophia asked. "That's fine. I'm good at making friends quickly," Emily replied confidently. "How wonderful. From now on, I'll be your grandmother. If you need anything, just let me know. We're going to keep this house as it is and build a care facility on the remaining land." Sophia is an intelligent woman who inherited vast lands and considerable assets from her parents. She once told me she had lived a relatively easy life, never marrying and having no other family. As she approached the end of her life, she thought about what she could do and came up with the idea of turning her home into a care facility. Since it would be difficult to do alone, she first talked to me about it. "I won't always be as healthy as I am now. Having a facility at home would be very reassuring. Benjamin, would you help me with my dream?" Sophia had already spoken with contractors and planned to build facilities on her other properties, ultimately creating a significant social welfare corporation. This corporation is the one with an annual revenue of $30 million, and Sophia has entrusted me with full authority. I took action immediately. First, I stopped all bank transactions and changed my card numbers to cut ties with Olivia. The next day, Olivia called me multiple times. "I can't withdraw any money. What are we supposed to do about living expenses? Now that you've cut ties with the loser, you should be able to live more luxuriously. I want a divorce. Emily wants to stay with me. We'll also handle the property division properly." Olivia readily agreed when I offered to give her the house as part of the property division. Since Emily often took my side, she might have been a nuisance to Olivia. Olivia easily agreed to let me have custody of Emily. As part of the property division, I decided to give Olivia the house she currently lives in with David. The other bank accounts were kept in my name. When I sent the divorce petition, Olivia signed and returned them. I handed over the petition at the court, officially becoming a single man. Now, Olivia and David, who I never adopted, are just strangers. I formally adopted Sophia, resolving to take care of her until the end. Care facilities will be more necessary in the future. Someday, I will go from caregiver to care receiver too. Though I don't want to think about it, it's an inevitable path. To ensure I receive proper care with a solid system, I must prepare now. Our new life began with me, Sophia, and Emily. Emily got to use a room on the second floor of the spacious mansion. Sophia had already arranged for a luxurious carpet, lovely colored curtains, a beautiful bed, and an expensive study desk. It feels like a dream. When I decided to come with you, I thought we'd end up in a tiny, bathless apartment. But now I feel like the main character of a storybook. Knowing Emily followed me with such resolve deepened my affection for her. Emily called Sophia grandma and helped her with various things. Sophia, moved by Emily's kindness, often shed tears of joy. I chose a life without marriage, thinking I'd never have grandchildren, but having such a lovely granddaughter now is the greatest happiness. I'm happy to have a grandma too. I never lived with my grandma, so I couldn't do anything for her. But now I can be kind to my new grandma. Seeing me involved in caregiving, Emily decided she wanted to follow the same path. While it was a joyous thought, knowing the hardships of the caregiving field, I also worried about her future. So, I always talked openly about both the good and bad sides of caregiving. In reality, the job is physically demanding and pays less compared to other professions. Many people mistake caregiving for volunteer or service work and treat caregivers disrespectfully. I'm glad you want to be a caregiver. But remember, it's not always a job where you're appreciated. There's night work, and the pay is low. Make sure you know the good and the bad before deciding. Honestly, I hesitate to rely on Emily for my care. The 5 years of caring for my mother left a lasting impression. Ideally, I'd like to stay healthy and pass away without needing care, but who knows what lies ahead. I plan to extend my healthy years by paying attention to my diet and exercising regularly. Once we settled into our new life, Olivia tried to contact us again. Apparently, she was struggling financially after the divorce. Meanwhile, I had become Sophia's adopted son and stood to inherit her substantial wealth. Isn't it unfair? You never told me about someone like Sophia. If I'd known, I wouldn't have agreed to the divorce. I figured you'd try to get your hands on Sophia's money, which is why I insisted on the divorce. I'm sorry I called you a loser. Can't we live together again? I'll change and be good to you. The idea of Olivia being good to me seemed like a joke. I decided to decline politely. Sorry, but I'm not interested. You should focus on finding someone new now that you're free. I'm asking you despite the shame because there's no one else like you. Didn't David say I was an embarrassment? To avoid more shame, let's end these calls too. I then blocked Olivia's number. I learned about Olivia and David's situation through Emily. Since Olivia is her biological mother, Emily occasionally met with her. From what I heard, both Olivia and David were in dire straits. Olivia had spent all her savings and decided to sell the house I'd given her to make ends meet. She moved into a small apartment with David and focused on finding a new partner. However, in her age group, many men were looking for women who could help them when they needed care in the future. Mom was angry, saying, "No way. I didn't get married to clean up after someone else's messes. I wonder why she doesn't consider working herself." Even if Olivia couldn't work for some reason, David, who was now an adult, should be able to. However, after graduating from college, David didn't get a job. I was surprised to learn that he had gotten into gambling during his college years, to the point where it affected his studies. Thanks to the efforts of college staff, he managed to graduate. But he didn't want a full-time job because it would interfere with his gambling, so he lived doing day labor jobs. Thinking back to the days when he lived with his father, I felt both exasperated and sad. A year has passed since then. Sophia and I finally came to our dream of opening a care facility. The facility was named New Leaves. It's a newborn facility, but we plan to expand it and provide care for as many elderly people as possible. New Leaves offers both day services and a nursing home for seniors who can no longer live independently. As the director, I am busy every day. Though not always fun, the days are fulfilling. In this era where people live to be 100 years old, it is important for us to support and help each other. Spring arrived, bringing the beautiful blooming season. I pushed Sophia's wheelchair, and we enjoyed the flowers together. Sophia remains lively and actively supports the recreational activities at the facility. Most of the residents don't know that Sophia is the owner of the facility. I want to live on the same level as the other residents. If they know I'm the owner, they might hesitate to befriend me. I agree with Sophia's approach. What I wish for now is for Sophia's healthy days to continue as long as possible. Mom, please live a long life. I want you to attend Emily's wedding as her grandmother. I'm looking forward to that. It's probably a long way off, so I need to keep going. I see a big tree in front of me. A gust of wind blew, scattering a shower of blossoms. While enjoying the beautiful sight, I want to continue spending joyful times with the other residents. My name is Thomas, and I'm 30 years old. I currently work as an employee at an IT company. I live alone in Tokyo. My hobby is reading. Especially, reading books at a cafe is my happiest time. I have loved reading since I was a child. Books teach me a lot of knowledge. They show me worlds I've never seen. Books are a guide to success in life. When I was young, smartphones were already popular, but my parents didn't let me have one, so I worked part-time in high school to buy my own. Many of my peers had phones since middle school, and they enjoyed watching trending videos together. Of course, I was envious. But I loved reading books just as much, and my parents would buy me any book I wanted, so I didn't grow up resentful. I read books of any genre. Novels, essays, history, and self-help books. Thanks to that, even though I didn't study much, I always had excellent grades in school. Probably because reading improved my comprehension skills, I understood the questions on any test. However, just reading Japanese books didn't help me with English. After exhausting my interest in Japanese books, I reached out to English books. I started with simple children's picture books. At that time, I wasn't interested in novels, but I could read simpler books. In Japan, many schools are now focusing on education speaking in English, but during my school days, speaking and listening were still weak points for most students. However, once I got my phone in high school and watched many English YouTube videos, my knowledge grew rapidly. I enjoyed it. And my English became one of the best in my class. Some YouTube videos detailed the English books I was interested in, which made me like English even more. Although I was an introvert who loved reading, my excellent grades led to a few girls confessing their feelings to me during school. Even though I spent breaks reading at my desk, apparently, some found that appealing. But if my grades were poor, no one would have paid any attention to me. Still, having read many books and having a mature mindset, I couldn't bring myself to like my classmates just because they lived nearby and attended the same school. No matter how attractive they were. I thought it would be boring to be with someone who couldn't see things from my perspective. Then, in high school, I encountered a book that changed my life. I was 17 at the time. 13 years have passed since then. Now at 30, I have been working at an IT company for about 4 years. Honestly, I haven't been getting along well with my colleagues here. But that's partly because I hid my educational background and most of my identity when I joined, hoping to do better after failing at my first job. I intended to act incompetent. I joined this company with a high school graduate resume. My previous job was at a trading company. I quit after 2 years. But apparently, I got this job because my previous trading company experience was impressive. When I joined, Kenneth, my supervisor, said, "We didn't really need a high school grad here. You're not even a new graduate. But because of your previous job at the trading company, we had no choice but to hire you." That's what HR said. Be careful, we value academic credentials here. It's President Kimball's policy. Hearing that, I regretted hiding my education, but I also thought, if they had such a bad attitude, they shouldn't have hired me. It was unpleasant. As Kenneth said, new hires like me were discriminated against based on our academic backgrounds. Whether we were capable or not didn't matter. The company also had a seniority system, and people who couldn't do their jobs were in charge. pushing their work onto quick workers like me. Hey, high school grad. They stopped calling me by my name. Other high school graduates, technical school graduates, and those from lower-ranked colleges were ridiculed and eventually stopped coming to work. There's a reason I've lasted 4 years here. I wanted to change Japan's ridiculous society, which values academic background and seniority. At work, being able to work quickly and accurately is the most important thing. Nothing else matters to the company or the customers. Even in medical schools, there's a significant difference in college rankings. But when you become a doctor, patients can't choose you based on whether you graduated from the University of Tokyo. And just because someone from the University of Tokyo is highly educated doesn't necessarily mean they'll do meticulous work or prioritize patient care. Japanese companies are still lagging behind the world. This is partly due to how we've been educated. But if we continue this way, the quality of Japanese work will keep declining. I thought things couldn't stay like this. I want to change Japanese companies and make Japan a country that continues to thrive as a developed nation. With such a passionate desire, I've endured being ridiculed by my superiors for 4 years in this company. Of course, being mocked daily can sometimes make a person feel negative. There were many times I thought about quitting because I couldn't change the company. However, some colleagues admired me despite the mockery from my bosses. Their support gave me the strength to keep going. I was saved many times by them. One of them was a graduate of a prestigious college, but they admired my quick and efficient work, and how I always left on time. Bosses often told me, "Don't leave before everyone else just because you're a high school grad." But I finished my work and the extra tasks dumped on me, and still left on time. They didn't like my attitude. Although I have ambitions to change the company, this is how Japan is. Living here means following Japanese rules. That realization disappointed me many times. I worked very fast. I arrived 15 minutes early, but finished my work faster than anyone else. Japan has countless unnecessary checks. Even when I was told to do pointless tasks, I didn't do them. Because they were pointless. If there's a clear reason for double checking, I don't skip it. But I thought, as in my previous job, there were too many unnecessary tasks. Without redundant checks, tasks are completed much faster. My quick work annoyed my bosses, who said things like, "You're cutting corners, aren't you? It's strange that you finish early. Or you're not doing the checks, are you?" This is why high school grads. Listen, regardless of what you think, this is the company's rule. If you can't follow the rules, we'll have to fire you. They probably saw my attitude as rebellious. In my previous job, I argued back and ruined relationships, so now I only respond when absolutely necessary. But I haven't made any mistakes. That's the point. It's too late after a mistake happens. I was shouted at. But I still thought there were too many unnecessary tasks, and there was no guarantee that doing them would prevent all mistakes. There were also excessive formalities in communication and documentation. Detail is important, but some female employees would change text colors and decorate notes just for sharing information. It only needs to be conveyed without errors, unnecessary decorations aren't needed. I was appalled by middle-aged bosses who admired such unnecessary efforts. Some employees spend work time meticulously arranging office supplies. I thought, no wonder they end up working overtime. My means of stress relief remained reading. There are more and more places in Tokyo where cafes are combined with bookstores, and even hotels where you can read your favorite books. Bookstores are clean and comfortable. There is air conditioning in summer. It feels heavenly. Time flies while reading. I enjoyed buying my favorite books and reading them at home. Since reading is a solitary activity, I didn't get a girlfriend or make many friends. Reading is a solo pursuit. Still, thanks to reading, my life was fulfilling. And on Monday, the days of being ridiculed at work would begin again. I believed I was the most capable worker in the company. However, with my high school diploma and cocky attitude, I thought I would never get promoted here. As the end of the year approached, the company's annual year-end party was coming up. I was feeling gloomy. I didn't have any close friends at work, and drinking with people I didn't like wasn't enjoyable. I would rather go home early and read a new book. But skipping the year-end party wasn't really an option unless there was a very good reason. And both Kenneth and my manager, Kyle, had reminded me beforehand. At the year-end party, your job as a high school grad is to entertain Mr. Kimball. Mr. Kimball's mood depends on you. I wondered why it had to be me, but I understood the reason at the party. Mr. Kimball was a graduate of a famous college, and that was his status symbol. That's why our company was such an academic meritocracy. And the reason why Mr. Kimball's mood depended on me. He needed someone to look down on and mock. Most of the high school and technical school graduates had already left the company because of the intense pressure from the bosses. I was a valuable target to entertain Mr. Kimball. At the party, I was seated next to Mr. Kimball. Thomas, you're lucky. You're sitting next to Mr. Kimball. This is something a high school grad like you will never experience again. Kyle, sitting across from me, said. I disliked Kyle, who was kissing up to Mr. Kimball, probably aiming to be the next president. Mr. Kimball, this guy's a high school grad. He's always so difficult to deal with. Kyle and my other bosses mocked me in front of Mr. Kimball. Well, it can't be helped. Those without an education are too dumb to follow orders. It's hard for me to understand. Since I graduated from a famous college. Of course, I was very irritated, but I endured it, thinking this irritation would end today. Your name is Thomas, right? You should listen to the smart people. I'd like to see how smart you are. Mr. Kimball scanned the room. Hey, Thomas, go hit on that blonde woman over there in English. If you succeed, you can leave the party and take her home. A stupid game. Mr. Kimball knew I wouldn't be able to do it and wanted to embarrass me. Making everyone laugh at my expense to liven up the party was one option. I hesitated for a moment. Go on, Kyle next to me pushed me forward. I approached the blonde woman. Hello, how are you? Hi, how are you? As I spoke to her, I could hear the murmurs from Mr. Kimball and the others. Thomas is giving it a try. But even a middle schooler can say hello, how are you? Indeed. I continued the conversation. My name is Kenneth. What is your name? My name is Mally. Where are you from? I'm from the US, but I've been living in Tokyo for 3 years. Oh, really? Well, are you unattached? Currently, yes. Can you drink beer together at a bar? Sure. I didn't expect my attempt to pick her up to go so smoothly, but it worked out easily. Mr. Kimball and the others probably didn't understand our conversation. After all, my English pronunciation is almost native. Mr. Kimball was left speechless. Kyle, with a red face, said angrily, You embarrassed Mr. Kimball just because you can speak English. Since I successfully hit on her in English, I'm going to take the beautiful lady out. Excuse me. I could hear the bosses telling me to read the room, but I ignored them and left the venue with the lady. She was with a group of 3, but they were all just about to leave. We went into a stylish bar nearby. I can speak Japanese. Mally said to me. Sorry for suddenly dragging you to a bar. I explained the details of the situation. So it's like a penalty game? Are you not interested in me? Mally said. No, it's not like that. I am interested in you. I thought you were beautiful from the moment I saw you. I want to know more about you. Japanese people don't hit on others much, so I was surprised. Mally said, but as we talked, we became closer. Having lived in the US, we had a lot to discuss about the differences between Japanese and American culture. We would be off for the New Year's holidays right after the year-end party. I often invited Mally out for drinks during the holidays. Then the day to return to work after the New Year's break came. I felt gloomy. It was my first day back at work after embarrassing Mr. Kimball at the year-end party. But I went to work anyway. You don't have a desk anymore. Kyle said, looking at me. I knew it. I had been fired. I felt devastated, wondering what I had worked so hard for over the past 4 years, and cried loudly when I got home. It was a shock. To be fired so easily. I had colleagues who admired me, but they would continue working at that company. I couldn't move on right away and called the HR department. A woman answered. This is Thomas. I was fired today without a valid reason, and I'm not satisfied with that. I said, and the woman replied coldly, "You're Thomas, right? You graduated from Harvard, didn't you? We've been informed of your false credentials." That's right, I went to Harvard after graduating from high school. It wasn't exactly false credentials, I had a reason for not listing it on my resume. I had a bad experience at my previous job because of it. It's not really false credentials, I just didn't list one of my qualifications, and I have a reason for that. But that's still a lie, isn't it? Her response was very cold. She was probably instructed to respond that way. Realizing that further conversation would be pointless, I hung up. So even Mr. Kimball, who likes highly educated people, hates me because I embarrassed him. I muttered to myself, "Oh, damn, what should I do now?" I couldn't stop talking to myself. At that moment, I thought of calling Mally. When I told her I got fired, she invited me to dinner. "Thomas, you got fired?" "Yeah." "Why?" "There are many strict rules in Japanese companies." When I said that, Mally seemed to understand. "I'm also tired of Japan." There was a brief silence, then, "Thomas, you can speak English, right?" "I have a friend who works in trade." "I'll introduce you." Being fluent in English, the idea of working in trade was appealing. "Please, I'd appreciate an introduction," I told Mally. A few days later, I met Mally's American friend, Mr. Smith, who worked in trade in Japan, at a cafe. We hit it off, and he first asked why I could speak English so well. When I told him I went to Harvard after high school, he was very surprised. I got into Harvard thanks to books. Since I loved books as a child, studying wasn't painful for me. The same went for English, I learned it naturally because I loved reading. The desire to attend Harvard also came from a book. I read one book in high school. I forgot the title, but it said if you want to change your life, go to Harvard. Although it was a high achievement, and I was anxious about living in the US, when I told my mother I wanted to go to Harvard, she surprisingly supported me. "Thomas, you've always been a good kid and easy to raise." "Thank you so much." "I'll support you as much as I can," my mother said. Of course, my school teacher said, "We want to help, but we've never had a student go to Harvard, so we don't know how to assist you." But my mother had meetings with my homeroom teacher, Mr. Thompson, and asked Mr. Sanders to prepare the necessary documents, and finally, through our efforts, I got accepted. When I got in, even Mr. Thompson shed tears of joy. The hardest part was convincing my father. He was against it. He questioned the point of spending so much money on an education without a clear goal. My reason for wanting to go to Harvard, written in a book, didn't seem convincing to him. But showing good grades on mock exams and my teamwork with my mother moved him. Seeing us pursue our dreams, he eventually felt compelled to support us by the summer of my senior year, according to my mother. Thanks to our efforts, I achieved my dream. Honestly, attending Harvard wasn't my long-standing dream. But encountering that book gave me a dream, and with the support of those around me, it came true. The desire to achieve something usually arises from what one feels capable of doing. Thus began my life in the US. Harvard is in Boston, quite an urban area. At Harvard, there were not only Americans but also people from overseas like me, which made the environment very enjoyable. Although I studied English, I initially lacked confidence in my pronunciation and felt nervous meeting people. But everyone was kind. I thought I had to be the one to initiate conversations to fit in, but my classmates were quite proactive in reaching out, and as days went by, I grew closer to everyone. I became particularly close with a student from Saudi Arabia. His different religion made our friendship very interesting. It felt like my world was expanding. We even traveled to New York together. New York was very stimulating and dazzling to me at the time. We watched a Broadway musical. To save money, I always ate burgers when we went out. I also experienced love. It was with an American. We dated in college but broke up before graduation. The reason was that I spent too much time on books and couldn't prioritize our relationship. At that time, I decided that if I ever fell in love again, it would be with someone more independent. Living in the US was challenging due to cultural differences, but it was very fulfilling. I often visited the company run by the father of an American friend I had gotten close to. He also wanted to go into business in the future, so he frequently visited his father's company. During those visits, I learned a bit about American companies. Everyone left work on time. They didn't wait for their bosses after finishing their work and enjoyed their time after work. They minimized unnecessary tasks to the extreme. I graduated from Harvard a year later than usual. Graduating from Harvard normally is indeed challenging. At graduation, I had mixed feelings about staying in the US. But my strong desire to change Japan led me to return and seek employment in a Japanese company. With a Harvard degree, job hunting wasn't difficult. Since I could use English, I thought a trading company would be a good fit and joined one. There, I learned that the values I had cultivated abroad didn't apply in Japan. From the beginning, my Harvard degree made people distance themselves from me. When I heard the rumors about me, it was like, Thomas seems out of place because he lived abroad. I know. It feels like he doesn't want to associate with Japanese people. Thomas? Oh, the Harvard grad? He's a bit odd. It feels like he looks down on Japan. They saw me as an outsider who looked down on Japan. Japan is a society where you must conform to others. If you stand out, you get criticized. I wasn't looking down on Japan, I just had a passionate desire to improve Japanese companies. There were also rumors about me leaving before my bosses. Of course, I would say my greetings when leaving, but I didn't ask, is there any other work left? I left because my work was done. That's natural. Why should I help slow bosses with their work? That's what I thought. Admittedly, I lacked teamwork. But that didn't warrant bad-mouthing. I thought I stood out because of my Harvard degree. If being discriminated against or standing out because of my education was a problem, it was better not to mention it. That's what I thought. People avoided interacting with me, and I missed out on important work communications, which affected my job performance. Eventually, my mental health suffered, and I quit the trading company. For a year, I didn't work. Or rather, I couldn't. I didn't want to do anything and was lethargic. Comparing my current state to my memories of American life made it painful. I think seeing lively people in American companies and then working in Japanese companies with the intent to change them but then facing a reality far from my ideal caused the gap between my expectations and reality, which eventually strained my mental health. What did I do? Of course, I read books. At that time, I was hooked on IT, so I read many books on that subject. A year later, I joined an IT company. It was the company I got fired from recently. On my resume, I didn't list my Harvard degree, only my high school diploma. After telling my story, Mr. Smith said, "What a waste. Having a Harvard degree but not utilizing your potential is really a waste." Mr. Smith said. But in Japan, my way of thinking isn't accepted. When I said that, Mr. Smith replied, "I understand." Having someone who understood me was a relief. Mr. Smith then said, "Why don't you work at my company? There are many Japanese employees, but the work environment is more like America." I am the president. I saw hope. My goal was to change the way people work in Japan, but after getting fired, I realized it wasn't feasible in the current climate. As the saying goes, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Japan has its own way of doing things. If I wanted to work my way, I'd have to start my own company. Mr. Smith's offer seemed like the best option for me at the moment. "Yes, I'd love to work with you," I replied. "Then, there's training involved, so can you start tomorrow?" "Yes, of course," I answered eagerly. Thus, a new chapter of my life began the next day. I first toured the company, and given my Harvard degree in native-level English, I started with handling phone calls and emails. I could tell I was thriving in this company. It reaffirmed that people have environments where they do and don't fit. While it's possible to endure and strive in a challenging environment, finding a place that suits you without pushing your limits is important. As I got used to the work, I was entrusted with tasks like shipping, delivery management, and transportation arrangements. The company had a clear distinction between work and personal time, and my private life became even more fulfilling. My personal life no longer revolved solely around reading. Yes, I started dating Mally. It seemed I was better suited for relationships with foreigners. Japanese women had often criticized me for not being considerate enough. Spending time with Mally was a joy, and my reading time decreased. This surprised me. I never imagined meeting someone who could take precedence over reading, which was my life. I was deeply moved by this. We visited theme parks, and since Mally was a foreigner, she loved temples and shrines, and we enjoyed collecting temple seals together. We also visited Kyoto, which Mally had always wanted to see. I liked Kyoto too, but visiting with Mally brought many new discoveries. If I visited alone, I might have overlooked some buildings and signs. Everyday life and environments became exponentially more enjoyable with Mally. Mally often joked, "Thomas, you got fired because you met me." Taken out of context, I might have been unlucky at that time. But meeting Mally led me to a job I truly wanted and someone who became more important than reading. Now, I'm very happy. Mr. Smith also valued my work in native-level English, treating me well as his subordinate. He often took me out for drinks after work. After getting fired from that previous company, my life turned around. No matter how much I wanted to change that company and aimed for a promotion, I would always be ridiculed as a high school grad and never get promoted there. 2 years after starting to date Mally, she told me she had something important to discuss. I live with Mally now. We had canceled our previous leases and rented a new place with 2 rooms. "Thomas, I want to go back to the US," Mally said. At first, I wasn't sure if this meant she wanted to break up or if she wanted me to go with her. I froze, unsure of how to respond. "If you'd like, Thomas, why don't we live together in the US?" I thought for a moment and said, "Of course, I'd love to, but things are going well with Mr. Smith's job. And it's hard for Japanese people to get an American visa. With a tourist visa, I can only stay for 3 months. Then let's get married. That way, there won't be any visa issues." I was surprised by the sudden mention of marriage. "Thomas, do you not want to get married?" "It's not that I don't want to. I do, but I always thought it would be someday. I'm just surprised it's now." "So you do want to? Then let's do it." And so, we decided to move to the US about 6 months later. Even though marriage would help with the visa, it's still challenging to get an American visa, so I planned to attend a school for the first year. When I told Mr. Smith about it, he said, "I'm staying in Japan, so you can always come back if you want." "Mr. Smith, aren't you going back to the US?" When I asked, he said, "I have a Japanese wife." That was news to me. "Wow, I didn't know. Why didn't you tell me before?" When I asked, Mr. Smith laughed and said, "I thought I had mentioned it." But he understood my decision to leave the job in 6 months. In this aspect too, Japanese companies make it hard to leave, so I thought that Mr. Smith was truly an American. Mr. Smith's American attitude respected personal circumstances. So, I planned to visit my parents with Mally. It would be the first time bringing Mally to my parents' house. And I was nervous about how they'd react to our international marriage and our plan to move to the US. My mother had been supportive when I went to Harvard, so I thought she'd understand, but I was worried about my father. We had a hotel lunch booked for our first meeting. Moreover, Mally wanted to wear a kimono, so we rented one, and she got dressed and had her hair and makeup done. Mally, with her blonde hair and blue eyes, was already stunning, and the kimono made her even more radiant. She looked beautiful. When we arrived at the hotel, my parents were already there. Seeing Mally, my mother immediately said, "Oh, she's so beautiful," which made Mally happy and eased my tension a bit. My father's face remained expressionless, and I couldn't tell what he was thinking. "We're getting married and we'll live in California, where her family is, in 6 months," I said. My mother, looking happy, said, "As long as you are happy, that's all that matters." My father just said, "Dad, do you approve?" I confirmed. "Yeah, you're lucky to have such a beautiful bride," he said. My mother added, "Both your father and I don't oppose it." Once you make up your mind, you always go through with it, don't you? Hearing this, I was touched by my parents' greatness. Mally, not understanding the indirect Japanese conversation, whispered, "Are your parents okay with it?" I smiled and said, "Yes, they're both okay with it." We enjoyed the kaiseki meal. Though Mally had been living in Japan, it was her first time trying kaiseki cuisine, and she was delighted. She was excitedly asking, "What's this?" while eating. After lunch, we went to my parents' house. "There's not much, but please relax." My mother said, preparing green tea and Japanese sweets for us. We spent a few enjoyable days and then returned to our place. We are now preparing to move to the US. Initially, we'll live at Mally's family home for a while. My plans have changed significantly. I wanted to change Japanese companies. But now, I want to live in the US. Some might think I lack direction, but as I read my books, I realized that life doesn't always go according to plan. That's just how it is. This guy is just an errand boy. It was Joshua, my 37-year-old manager, who said that about me. The day the CEO from the overseas headquarters visited, Joshua and I took him to a fancy restaurant. Suddenly, the CEO started staring intently at me. Then, the CEO revealed my true identity. My name is John, and I'm 53 years old. While working at a life insurance company, I had been caring for my mother, but she developed dementia and had to move into a nursing home. I quit my job to care for her, but it became too lonely being at home alone, so at 53, I luckily got hired in the general affairs department of a large company. However, Joshua considered me an incompetent old man and didn't like me. Now, let's reflect on my complex life, which has passed its halfway point. I was born to a father who ran a small business and a stay-at-home mother. When I was 3, my father's business was failing, and he suddenly passed away from an illness. I was 3 then and I have hardly any memories of that time. I vaguely remember a brother-like figure who was always with me. He was probably a neighborhood friend. By the time I was aware of my surroundings, my mother and I were living in a small apartment on government support, and she had a heart condition. Caring for me was too difficult for my mother, so I was placed in a children's home. That was when I was 4 years old. My mother probably saw me off with a forced smile. I faintly remember her smiling and waving goodbye. At the home, I shared a room with a boy named Bobby, who was the same age as me, and I cried constantly. I thought I could go home in the evening. When I realized I couldn't, I refused to eat and stayed under the bed. For a while, I couldn't eat at all. I stayed in the room and cried all the time. The others called me crybaby, but Bobby would drag me to the big hall, saying, "Hey, John, let's play." Everyone shouted, "Crybaby's here," but Bobby would say, "Everyone cried at first too." Then an older boy brought me a picture book and read it to me. I was captivated by the book, and gradually, the caregivers read more picture books to me, and I started eating with everyone. Gradually, I was able to sleep. Sometimes I dreamed of my mother and woke up crying in the morning. "John, are you okay? It's time for breakfast." "I've been here since I was a baby, so we're like brothers." "Yeah, I'm okay." "You don't have parents either, Bobby?" "No. Maybe they are somewhere." At just 5 years old, we had such conversations. Then I entered elementary school. I had a rather large mole between my eyebrows, and at school, I was bullied. Called a parentless Buddha statue or told touching me would bring bad luck. Bobby would defend me, saying, "I'm always with him and nothing bad happens," but we were still outcasts. An older boy from the home warned me to ignore what others say, so I was somewhat prepared. As those days passed, when I was in 3rd grade, a blond boy named Sam joined the home. His eyes were a clear blue, and he didn't seem to speak much Japanese. Sam was in the room next to mine, always reading many English books his father had given him. I loved books, so I approached Sam, saying, "Tell me what these say." Sam nodded and said, "Yes." Then Sam simply said, "I don't understand Japanese." From then on, Bobby and I talked to Sam a lot. Sam gradually learned Japanese, and Bobby and I slowly learned English. Sam had come to Japan with his father after his mother passed away in the US, and his father's busy work schedule brought him to our home. At school, Sam, Bobby, and I were in the same class, and during breaks, Bobby and I would help Sam with language arts and math, mixing in English. Through this, we all developed a love for studying. Sam occasionally received English books from his father, and Bobby and I were fascinated by them. During meals, Sam would teach us the names of fruits and vegetables in English, making mealtime enjoyable. During summer break, Sam intensively taught us English, and we spent our days translating English books into Japanese and discussing them with Sam. We also helped Sam with his summer homework, and gradually, Bobby and I started to speak some English. In middle school, Bobby and I had excellent grades. Sam, who had become quite proficient in Japanese, would ask us about kanji for his language arts classes, and his grades improved as well. Even after returning to the home, the three of us devoted ourselves to studying. We smoothly passed our high school entrance exams. We graduated at the top of our class in high school. However, after graduating from high school, we had to part ways. The farewell was very sad. We had supported each other like brothers, or even more than brothers. I secured a job at a life insurance company, Bobby got a job at a publishing company, and Sam was hired at his father's company. Bobby was happy about getting company housing. Then, graduation day came. Amidst the early blooming of cherry blossoms in spring break, a luxury car arrived at the home. It was Sam's father. We greeted everyone, including Mr. Carter, the head of the children's home, and then returned to our homes. Sam's father wanted to thank us personally, so Bobby and I saw Sam off. Bobby and I held back our tears as we were each driven home in the children's home's car. When I got home, my mother cried with joy and apologized to me. Looking much older than I remembered, my mother said, "John, I'm sorry for all the hardship you went through." "Mom, are you okay?" For me, living at the home wasn't hard at all. It must have been tougher for you, being alone. But I'm here now. I have a job. And we don't need government support anymore. As I said this, the tears I had been holding back streamed down my face, and I hugged my frail mother. That day, my mother splurged on meat and made beef stew. Apparently, if she had heart surgery, she could improve significantly, but being old-fashioned, she refused further government help. Bobby, Sam, and I exchanged addresses. One day, Sam and his father visited us. It was just before the entrance ceremony for our jobs. "My son Sam is very grateful to you, John," Sam's father said, handing my mother a business card. Later, we found out that Sam's father was the son of a real estate mogul in the US and had come to Japan for resort development. And the Japanese facility wasn't free for them. It seems Bobby and I had been under government care. Sam's father took my mother and me to Bobby's company housing, and the five of us went to a family restaurant. Sam's father had something to discuss. After the meal, he said, "You boys are very good at studying. Sam's Japanese has improved thanks to you." "No, we learned a lot of English from Sam," I replied. "Me too," Bobby added. "That's natural. Without you, Sam would have had a lonely school life," Sam's father said in fluent Japanese. He continued, "How would you like to attend university in the US?" What? What? Bobby and I were surprised. My mother said, "We don't have that kind of money. Don't worry about the money. My father passed away, and I've taken over his business. I'm returning to the US with Sam. And I want you boys to further your education. So please, don't worry about the expenses." But the five of us fell silent. I broke the silence. "Mr. Thompson, thank you. Actually, my mother has a heart condition, and I want to stay by her side." "Is your mother's condition serious?" "Yes, she can get better with surgery, and I plan to work so she can have it." "In that case, I know a doctor. You should act quickly. Please, come to the US. As I mentioned before, John, you can pay me back later." "What?" I was even more surprised. And I pondered. I wanted my mother to get well. "Mr. Thompson, thank you for offering to let me pay you back later. I'll gratefully accept your help." When I said that and bowed, Sam and his father smiled warmly. Meanwhile, Bobby was still unsure. I've been in the children's home since I was born, and I still don't know much about Japan. So, I think I want to stay here." "I see. Then I want you to go to university in Japan. It's still quite a credential-oriented society here," Sam's father said. He handed Bobby a large envelope as if he had it prepared in advance. Bobby took it and was astonished. The contents of Sam's father's attaché case seemed to be detailed inside. It appeared to be a substantial amount of money, enough to attend university. Bobby was. "I'm surprised. Can I also pay you back later?" "Of course. You've had a hard time too. Enjoy your university life." Afterwards, on the way home, Sam's father told Bobby to get a seal for his bank account and took him to the bank to deposit the money for safety. Bobby declined the job offer, rented a small apartment, worked part-time, and studied hard. A year later, he was accepted into Tokyo University. He worked as a tutor while paying back Sam's father bit by bit, but Sam's father didn't accept the payments. As for me, I declined the job offer and went to California with my mother and Sam's family. We stayed at Sam's mansion for a while. Despite being a bit late, Sam and I were both accepted into the prestigious UCLA. And so, we became university students. My mother underwent successful heart surgery, thanks to a doctor recommended by Sam's father. She recovered gradually while resting. The university required TOEFL and SAT exams, but Sam's father helped us with English conversation, business English, and grammar. Sam's father, with tears in his eyes, said, "I couldn't save my wife, but I'm glad John's mother is getting better." What a compassionate man he was. We lived in a place called Little Tokyo in California. California is surrounded by natural beauty like beaches, mountains, and deserts. Little Tokyo is a Japanese-style town reminiscent of the Meiji era, with many Japanese residents and tourists. The murals in the neighboring town were captivating. The university was less than an hour away by bus, which felt like a dream. My mother felt guilty staying idle and started working at a souvenir shop in Little Tokyo. It was also part of Sam's father's property. As an international student, I couldn't work outside the campus, but campus jobs were allowed, so we managed on our own. However, Sam's father never accepted rent or tuition from us. Sam and I enjoyed our university life, spending summers working and having fun at the beach, even dating, and we graduated together in 4 years. After graduation, Sam and I helped with sales at Sam's father's real estate company. Sam got his driver's license early, and we often went out together. The souvenir shop my mother worked at was popular, and we had no trouble making ends meet. She was very happy to be able to work, and her once gaunt cheeks filled out as she started eating well. Although I received a salary from our sales work, I wanted to use it to pay for my tuition, but Sam's father wouldn't accept it. He said it was because he always wanted another child. Sam's father's company was a large corporation, and Sam assured me that I didn't need to worry about money. I received an airmail from Bobby, saying he had graduated and secured a job at a major publishing company. It was a time when conversations were carried out through letters or phone calls, as mobile phones were not yet common. I spent my 20s running around the US working in real estate sales. My sales performance was good, and I wanted to repay Sam's father in some way. Before I knew it, I had picked up a native English accent during my university years. One day, my mother received an airmail from Japan. It said that her sister was now alone and needed care. While I was in the home, my mother had relied on her sister for shopping and household chores. When I told Sam and his father about this, they encouraged me to return to Japan. By then, mobile phones and the internet were widespread, and I had received an airmail from Bobby with his email address. We started communicating via email, and I shared my email address with Sam, deeply bowing to thank his father before returning to Japan. My mother and I rented a small apartment near my aunt. In Japan, I joined a life insurance company, and Sam occasionally visited us from the US. At the insurance company, I shared my background only with the CEO, Mr. Taylor, and soon started running around in sales. The sales style was different from the US, so I began by learning from my seniors. I gradually improved my sales performance but never indulged in luxury. That was life for my mother and me. When my aunt entered a special nursing home, my mother started working part-time in a factory. The seasons changed quickly. Meeting Sam had changed my life, and I couldn't help but be amazed by it. I was already 50 years old. Sam had married in the US and had a happy family. I had become the CEO of Sam's father's company's branch in Japan. However, I mostly delegated tasks to employees, only reviewing documents and sending them to Sam via computer. Then, when my mother turned 73, she became bedridden due to a compression fracture in her back. I quit my job at the insurance company to care for her. I was offered a position in the General Affairs Department, but my mother was my only family. Still single due to my busy work life, I devoted myself to caring for her. Although she initially improved, she eventually developed severe dementia. I was 53 years old. Her dementia was quite advanced. I placed my mother in a nursing home. A nearby nursing home had a vacancy, but my mother gradually began to forget who I was. Living alone in the apartment, I recalled my younger self crying in the children's home. I managed the company with the help of the property management company and employees, with minimal work involving year-end settlements and correspondence. Bobby had become a department head at a publishing company and had children in college. I felt the urge for the three of us to meet again. Sam's father had become chairman, and Sam was now CEO of the company in the US. Sam's daughter was attending our alma mater. I asked Sam if he could come to Japan. I arranged to meet with Bobby and Sam at a fancy restaurant. Bobby and I split the bill. I picked up Sam from the airport, and we hugged joyfully at Haneda. I arranged Sam's accommodations. After resting for a night to adjust to the time difference, we enjoyed a leisurely day of shopping like children. At the restaurant that night, Sam said, "So your mother is in a nursing home now. You didn't end up with your girlfriend in the US, huh?" "No, she didn't want to come to Japan. Anyway, Sam and your father have been incredibly helpful to us." "It's fine. My father was just lonely. No matter how much money you have, without family, there's no dream or hope. All he had left was taking over my grandfather's business. He wanted us young ones to have dreams." "I see. I'm alone again now. I have time on my hands, and at 53, I'm looking for a job other than being a CEO. Yes, you've taken good care of the Japan branch, but the few employees we have are very competent. I don't know how to feel about my daughter getting a boyfriend." "Yeah, I get it. I have a daughter too." We enjoyed our meal with such conversations. Then Sam said, "You know, I have a connection at a foreign life insurance company dealing with real estate claims. Their branch is nearby. Should I introduce you?" "Really? That would be great. I can't handle sales anymore, but I could do an office job." Sam immediately called Mr. Smith, the CEO of KM Corporation, and introduced me. An interview was set up for the following week. Sam explained my background and my current role as CEO to Mr. Smith, and my history was kept confidential, known only to Mr. Smith and a few in HR. Sam enjoyed his long-missed Japanese food, and as Bobby's vacation ended, we saw Sam off at the airport. I had my interview at KM Corporation and was soon hired into the General Affairs Department. I introduced myself and took my seat at my desk. The office included a very young, late-30s elite manager named Joshua, who graduated from Tokyo University. The department head was a woman named Michelle, who appeared to be around 40. Michelle was very beautiful and had a strong career woman vibe. In his initial greeting, Joshua introduced himself as a Tokyo University graduate. Ah, credentialism. What a pity. I realized it instantly. Even though I had attended university thanks to Sam's father, the US was merit-based, as was my previous insurance company. Despite being a foreign company, Joshua's young age combined with his credentialism was disheartening. While I was typing at my desk, Joshua said, "Hey, you old mid-career hire. Get some coffee for everyone." "Yes, Joshua." "Right away," I replied. Michelle interjected, "Joshua, watch your tone. You can't speak to a senior like that. John has a proper name. I'll get the coffee myself." "Michelle, the department head shouldn't be getting coffee." "John, I'll get it today." I bowed my head to Michelle and sat back down. "John, apologize to Michelle," Joshua ordered. "Oh, yes." I apologized to Michelle when she brought the coffee. She smiled warmly and said, "It's okay. I need the exercise." During lunch break, I ate a convenience store bento at my desk. Michelle always went out for lunch. Joshua seemed to have a homemade lunch. "Hey, John. Are you seriously single at your age, eating convenience store food?" "That's pathetic." "Yes, I'm single. But I don't mind," I retorted. Joshua looked puzzled as he ate his homemade lunch. After lunch, Joshua said, "Hey, John. Make 50 copies of this." "Yes, right away." I went to the copy room and looked at the contents of the document. I immediately realized it was an important copy. This foreign company collaborated with financial firms, using credit card information for phone sales. It was a legitimate partnership, so there was no problem. Thus, sales were done entirely over the phone. Employees spent their time making call after call. There were no field sales. I created and mailed documents for the contracted clients. It wasn't too busy. I logged into a different app on my computer and could see information about the properties I was managing. There were female employees who acted mostly as operators. When Michelle went out, Joshua said, "Hey, John. You look bored. Why don't you clean the building today?" "Yes, Joshua." Even though I was constantly assigned menial tasks, it wasn't a burden compared to my previous job. I chatted with the cleaning lady and helped her clean the entrance. Just then, Michelle returned. "John, what are you doing? The cleaning is supposed to be done by the cleaning staff. Please return to your desk immediately." "Oh, Michelle." Joshua instructed me to do this, and besides, I could use the exercise, I replied. "Oh, I see," Michelle said as she walked back to the office. Once the cleaning was mostly done, I returned to the office. Suddenly, Joshua dropped a thick stack of documents on my desk and said, "John, this is today's paperwork. Finish it by the end of the day." "Understood," I said, speeding up my typing on the keyboard. I was already familiar with using a computer from my previous job. I managed to finish the work with some overtime. Joshua left promptly. I received an encouraging internal email from Michelle, saying, "Keep up the good work." At 7 p.m., I finished and went to a diner before heading home. Joshua might act superior, but I enjoyed working, and being busy was better than being bored at home. Compared to the busy life of sales, menial tasks were nothing. One day, Michelle invited me to dinner through an internal email. I responded that I'd be happy to join her, even if it was just a family restaurant. When Michelle arrived, she let down her tied-up hair, and her sleek black hair shone. I felt a slight flutter. "John, sorry for the sudden invitation. I'm single too and thought it would be better to have company for dinner," she said. "That's an honor," I replied. We ordered and had a meal together. Joshua can be quite arrogant, can't he? He's always been like that with new hires, and some have even quit because of him. I often warn him, but..." She explained. "Is that so?" "Well, he did mention graduating from Tokyo University. Given my age and being a mid-career hire, it's understandable that he might look down on me," I said. "Really?" "But..." I reported it to Mr. Smith. She said with a mischievous smile. "After that," she asked, "can we have dinner like this sometimes? That makes me happy." "Of course, Michelle." I said that and felt my face warm up a bit. We started going out for meals frequently, and eventually, Michelle and I began dating, spending weekends watching movies and shopping together. One day, Michelle told Joshua, "Joshua, the CEO from the overseas headquarters is coming tomorrow. Arrange for a nice restaurant immediately. And you and John are invited." "What? The company CEO?" "Understood, Michelle." Joshua immediately called to make a reservation at the nice restaurant as Michelle instructed. I wondered what business the CEO had with me. I found it quite puzzling. Then, the following evening, it was a bright night with a beautiful autumn full moon. The restaurant we arrived at was the same one I had visited with Sam and the others before. Joshua and I nervously headed to the restaurant. Then, the sliding door opened. A Japanese man, around my age and dressed in an obviously expensive suit, entered. I had expected an American, so I was surprised. Joshua greeted him, "Thank you, sir, for coming from afar." "Thank you. I plan to relax a bit here in Japan." "How are things?" "Everything is going smoothly." "And you are?" the CEO said, turning to me. Joshua interjected, "Oh, he's just an errand boy." "No, Joshua. I wasn't asking you." The CEO directed his attention to me. "I'm John, a mid-career hire," I introduced myself. "Nice to meet you, John," Mr. Davis said, extending his hand. I responded with a firm handshake. Then, I received a business card from him. It read Robert Davis. After a moment, Mr. Davis asked Joshua, "Is John really just an errand boy?" "Yes, that's right. Since he's a mid-career hire, he's handling various tasks for now." You have assigned John as an errand boy. Joshua, do you realize who you're talking about? Excuse me? Joshua's eyes widened. Mr. Davis continued, "Joshua, you might be a Tokyo University graduate, but it seems you lack the ability to judge people." "John, I'm sorry, but I did some research on you." "What? You graduated from UCLA and were an excellent salesperson in the US. Did you enjoy your time there?" "Yes, Mr. Davis, it was a very rewarding experience." "Did Sam tell you about it?" "Yes, Sam told me everything. I also did some additional research." "How is your mother?" "She's in a nursing home, but I visit her twice a week." "She's doing well, thank you." "I see, that's good," Mr. Davis said, looking a bit melancholic. As the food arrived, Joshua muttered, "I didn't know about UCLA." "I'm sorry. Do you always judge people solely by their educational background, Joshua? The US is merit-based. Most of our clients here in Japan are elderly. Referring to someone as just an errand boy is unacceptable. Joshua, you're demoted to a regular employee. John, starting tomorrow, you will be the branch manager." "What? Me, the branch manager?" "Yes. The current branch manager is an American and he wants to return home. I want you to take over." "I am honored." "Thank you. I will do my best." "Mr. Davis, I'm truly sorry. I beg you, please don't demote me. I have a wife and children." Joshua pleaded, bowing deeply. He then bowed to me, apologizing as well. "Mr. Davis, Joshua has apologized sincerely. I will keep an eye on him from now on," I said, feeling a bit conflicted. And at that moment, a realization struck me. "John, you truly have a big heart." "If you say so." Mr. Davis agreed. Joshua thanked us with tears in his eyes. "Now, let's enjoy this Japanese meal." "Take your time," Mr. Davis said with a smile, and Joshua poured him some sake. We chatted about recent topics and ended the dinner on a pleasant note. After seeing Joshua off, Mr. Davis called out to me, "John, I have something important to discuss. Could you come to my hotel?" I agreed and followed him. In a room on a high floor, Mr. Davis spoke to me. "John, you've had a tough time." He placed 2 packs of shrimp crackers and beers on the table. Shrimp crackers. They were the snacks my mother used to give me when I was hungry. I realized the boy who felt like a friend back then was. I clutched the pack of crackers, tears welling up. "Brother, do you remember? Our family used to share these. Our mother said the mole on your forehead would bring good fortune. She had a sister who didn't have children, and her husband worked at a big company. I was adopted into their family. My uncle forbade me from seeing our mother, who was on government support, and I couldn't see her for a long time. I received an elite education and started a company in the US. I learned about you from Sam and repaid Sam's father for your university and mother's surgery. I've wanted to see you so much. Please, let me see our mother tomorrow." My brother said. We embraced, crying together. The full moon's light shone brightly through the window, celebrating our reunion. The next day, with shrimp crackers in hand, Robert and I visited our mother. Although she no longer recognized either of us, Robert held her tightly, crying, "Mom! Mom!" She smiled and happily ate the shrimp crackers. Afterward, I saw Robert off at the airport, and the following day, I started working as the branch manager for Sam's company. And for Robert's company as well. Michelle proposed to me, and we got married, buying a spacious apartment. The next year, despite being an older mother, Michelle gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, and now the 3 of us live happily together. No one can live alone. I realized once again how much I am supported by various people, and I felt deep gratitude for it. I quietly vowed to work hard for my family's sake in the future.